Welcome to the International Franchise Association's Women's Franchise Committee podcast, Her Success, Stories of Female Franchise Leaders. I'm Ashley Davidson with Fish Consulting, and today I am so excited and honored to speak with Christina Russell, CEO of Radiance Holdings, and a former member of the Women's Franchise Committee herself. Christina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, what an honor. Thank you, Ashley. It's so exciting to get to sit in this seat and to get to
Right. We're really excited. So before we jump into the questions about your career, your journey in franchising, I'd love to ask you about Radiance Holdings. I know it's only a few years old. So maybe for those listeners who are not familiar with the company quite yet, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, yeah. So Radiance is a platform that was set up like so many platforms in franchising to really realize the sort of synergies across franchise brands that are in the same sector. And so we started out with this vision when I came to Sola Salons back in 2019 of taking, what we had learned from Sola, which goes across all aspects of beauty. It's definitely focused on hair, but we have people from all aspects of beauty operating out of our suites, and really take the knowledge for that and say, can we bring in other brands in beauty and wellness that can actually work together under that same platform and get the benefits from our knowledge as a franchisor to help those brands to grow in really meaningful ways. And so back in 2020, we knew that our strategy was to acquire brand two, which was going to be in the spa world. And we were already talking with the Woodhouse spas. And then when COVID hit, the question was, are we going to have the courage to continue to do this? Even with what's hitting us in the unknowns around COVID back then. And we decided to go ahead and do it. And we're so glad that we did. So we acquired the Woodhouse. We launched an e-commerce platform called Beauty Hive that serves back bar for hairstylists. And we stood up the Radiance platform to really manage all of that. And today we're looking at a lot of brands across beauty and wellness and saying, all right, what's the right third brand for our platform? And that'll be the direction that we go from here, is to keep adding brands to this amazing platform that we've built.
Wonderful. I have to say, I recently went to the Woodhouse closest to me, which is out in Gainesville, Virginia. Amazing experience. I have to give a shout out to my massage therapist, Basil. It was absolutely fantastic. He sent me a handwritten note afterwards that I received in the mail. And I don't know if that's something that you do just across the system, but I thought that was such a nice personal touch. And I had never received that before in all of the places that I've gone. So it was great.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that appealed to us about the Woodhouse when we were looking for a second brand. So Sola being, the leader in its space, the one that really innovated and invented the whole suites concept, it was a very special brand. And so to get a sister brand for that, we needed to find something that was special in its own right. And the Woodhouse is very much that. And so you think of like a sort of the mainstream massage brands that are out there. This is so different because it's really a luxury brand. So they do things like this, very personal touches that engage that client in a deeper way. So think almost of like, the Ritz-Carlton, the Four Seasons, but in your backyard. So most people are super surprised when they walk into a Woodhouse of what they find. There's salt rooms in many of them, there's saunas in many of them, and the relaxation rooms, with the big chezzes, and they're on par with what you're going to get with a luxury vacation. So it's a pretty neat concept, and we're super proud of what we're building with that.
Wonderful. It was absolutely lovely when I went. I'll be going back soon. So let's jump into your career. I feel like a lot of people have an interesting story about how they got into franchising, and I know that you certainly do. So can you tell us about your journey into franchising?
Oh gosh, it's so funny. I've talked to a lot of people about this because, you think about like looking at people that you look up to and wow, they must have known what they were doing and had their career. And I was so not that. So when I was in school, like if people had done superlatives, I would have probably gotten the superlative least likely to ever go into business. And I was a bit of like a humanities type person. So I was interested in literature and philosophy and art, and then had this sidebar interest in sciences and physics. And so I didn't really know what direction I wanted to go, and took a lot of classes and everything. Was a couple of credits shy of a minor in French, and ended up graduating with a degree in English, starting a PhD program and hating it. I just hated it. And so I dropped out very quickly and was doing side work as a freelance writer, doing science writing, and ended up starting a career in that, and ultimately working at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in the physics division, running all of their science and editing for physics. And my husband was the one that had this crazy idea, like, you've hit the glass ceiling, you're in your 20s, we need to do something different and get out there and be entrepreneurs. And I told him it was nuts. But he discovered franchising. And it was one of those things where the business model really appealed to me because it was a way to get into something that I knew nothing about, running a business, and to have the support to do it. And so this was with Curves back in the day, before that brand was even a household name. And growing through that company in a brand that grew to about 10,000 locations in 5 years, and watching all the things that happened right to grow an amazing brand like that, and all the things that happened wrong that caused that brand to have some major problems as it continued to move forward. It was the perfect learning curve for me. So I ended up, working for them within a year of doing it. I won Franchisee of the Year in my first year, which I didn't even know what that meant. And started working for them as a mentor, helping other business owners to get their businesses off the ground. And then very quickly, that brand started to experience closure simultaneously with growth. And a lot of us that really understood how to run the business started doing the first, version of operation support for that brand. And it was just a great learning curve. And so I grew through them, went through the private equity transition with them, ended up taking on Camp Bow Wow when Heidi Ganahl, the founder of Camp Bow Wow, stepped away, and sold her company to VCA Antec, and then went on to Pure Bar, and now Sola and this. And so I just fell in love with franchising through that first experience as a franchisee, and really seeing what does it mean to do this right and to be able to help people be successful.
I love that you went from potentially being named the person least likely to go into business to franchisee of the year. I mean, that's talk about a life turn. I just that's so interesting. Um, so I know that throughout this entire journey that you just described, that you had a moment in your life where you made a decision that really changed your career and the direction that it was taking. Can you share that moment, and maybe why you made that decision?
Yeah, I would say that, getting into Curves, and, even at the National Lab, I was in my 20s, but I was there for, gosh, almost 8 years. So I'm a very loyal person. I love to dig in and really get to know a company. So starting with Curves, I was there for 15 years. And so I'd grown through the organization, was given the opportunity to take over operations when they had already declined to 6,000 units, with this big challenge of stabilizing that brand and then getting it, moved over to private equity was super exciting. But I had this realization when the equity firm came in, that they thought of me as being the VP level person and were bringing in leadership above me. And oh my gosh, I was crushed. Like, this opportunity should be mine. And what do I do? And so I was in this position of thinking, is this the time to really push hard and try to continue to grow with this organization, or to take the risk and try to find my own corner office? And it was really scary. And so during that time, I had gone back to get my MBA, and, sort of knew, from working through my MBA, what is that going to look like? And I put myself out there to the recruiter world, and was really intrigued by all the offers that were coming around. But it was Camp Bow Wow that really got me excited. A small company, the opportunity to work with a really, groundbreaking female founder, and to do something in a brand that was, I mean, frankly, much smaller than the department that I was running at Curve. So it was approachable for me. But it was still just it was a scary thing to take that first risk and be there without a net, and to know that, all roads were going to lead to me when I sat in that corner office chair and was having to make those decisions. But I needed that kick in the butt, I think, from the private equity firm coming in and really seeing a different vision for me to get the courage to actually go out and do it on my own.
That's great. Wonderful. So let's talk about challenges. I mean, you are in the CEO seat, and there's clearly too many challenges impacting franchising for us to discuss all of them in the time that we have together today. But what do you
Yeah.
think is the biggest challenge that you're experiencing right now in your business, and how are you overcoming it?
Yeah, it's funny because we've all gone through so many challenges in the last couple of years, and I think it's we all can't. There's all these memes and jokes about it, like this year's going to be better, this year's going to be easier. But I think what we all face now is something that most of the economists say are going to be the new normal, which is that employers are no longer in the driver's seat interviewing employees. The employment market has shifted to where we are now being interviewed by the employees. There's so few people in the marketplace for so many of the jobs that we're all looking to fill, that we as employers have to really sell ourselves and sell our culture and sell what we're going to do for this next generation of workforce. And it's been a challenge. I think about it from the Sola perspective. We're very blessed. It's a low employment model. And the folks that are in Sola as our clients are independent studio, owners. They're businesses in their own right. So it takes us out of that. But on the Woodhouse side, a franchisee opens her doors with 25 to 30 employees, and finding massage therapists, finding great hospitality people, you're in competition with so many other businesses to do that. And so I think it's given us all a challenge of really rethinking the way that we approach our teams. And I'm proud to say that I've always been somebody who's led by work-life integration, and some of that was just sort of necessity as the mother of invention. But my first team was 35 field personnel, so you learn how to manage people in a different way. But we've taken that to new levels and just thinking about how we build our cultures. And it's still, it's one of those things where just finding the right people and really attracting them and getting them in is hard, and helping franchisees to do that, I think, is going to be the mission of franchisors going forward. And even in an era of joint employer, if we don't do that as franchisors, we're going to really struggle to see our franchisees succeed.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that it's this new normal, as we've been calling it for the past 2 years, but it's not, there's no end to it. I think it's just going to keep going. And I think once people wrap their heads around that, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Yeah. And it has to be authentic. And I think that's been the cool thing. I mean, even, 8, 10 years ago, when we were all making jokes about millennials, there were a lot of thinkers on this that I would hear talk about it that would say, but they're not wrong, that
Mhm.
work-life integration needs to be something that we all rethink, that it's better for families, it's better for us as whole individuals to think that way. And I think it's the same thing now. It's like for all the generations, we have to challenge our thinking and figure out, how do we learn from one another. And this younger workforce that's coming in with these expectations, those expectations aren't wrong, they're just hard, right? So we have to think
Mhm.
about that as leaders. And really, that's what I love about being a part of the IFA, is you can lean in with other business leaders to learn what they're doing to overcome those issues and take some of those learnings for your own. And then you have the opportunity, when you nail it and get something right, to be able to hopefully share with the industry in ways that helps all ships to rise.
And that's a really good segue, I think, into the next question that I wanted to ask you. Still keeping on the topic of challenges, but as a CEO, I think you're often expected to have all the answers to guide your team. Now, I'm not a CEO myself, but I would assume that any CEO will tell you that that's not always the case. You don't always have the answers. So when you're faced with a challenge that you don't know how to solve, how do you get to your answers? Are you tapping into peers? Are you tapping into other IFA members? How do you get there when you just don't know?
Yeah, I made a joke several times during COVID that I wanted to get a T-shirt to wear on all the Zoom calls we were doing. It says, "I literally have no idea what I'm doing,"
Right.
because we all try to be brave and pretend that we have the answers, and we're the smartest person in the room, and this is what we're going to do, because you think that's what a leader is supposed to do. But I think for all of us, the COVID years have been very humbling, because you realize you're actually only navigating the 7 feet that are in your headlights, right? So you can see 7 feet ahead. You kind of know where you want to go, but how you're going to get there, you have to realize that those answers aren't going to be as clear in the eras that we're going through. I mean, the rampant inflation that we're all dealing with, the fact that salaries are escalating and you're trying to adjust pricing in ways that you're looking at your competitors, and where are those rivals and what are they doing? We're all having to kind of navigate all of this. It's a really tough thing. And so through my career, I think for whatever reason, I've just been very blessed to have really good mentors. And I don't know if that is all blessing, or the fact that I've just always been very open to that, very open to getting advice and feedback and to trying to grow. I would just say that more than anything has been the thing that has kept me moving forward in those little 7 foot steps to be able to get to the right place. IFA is tremendous for it. I'm also a part of a CEO group here in Denver through Vistage that has been tremendous for it. But finding those people across sectors, across industries that you can listen to. And then I would say really listening to your teams. So in my company, I mean, I really make a point of trying to engage regularly with not only my executive team, but with the entire company through all hands meetings, and then with our leadership team, which has grown tremendously. I mean, our company has, gone from, oh gosh, we had less than 20 employees when I came on board, and now we have over 100 employees, but you've got to hear them all. You've got to understand, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And that's what really helps you get to the best decisions that you can make. And you won't always be right, but at least you've really heard everything you need to hear to make the best decisions. And you're not just out there making it up with, listening to your own stuff,
I like that point that you made, that you may not always be right, but it's at least this, this scientific wild ass guess, if I can say that. It's like I hear that term all the time. It's like you've made the best decision that you possibly can with the information that you have and talking to your team. So I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I think about it with the Woodhouse. We sat in a room and said, okay, we were all gun ho for this. Now, 14 days to flatten the curve. What does this really mean? Like, we all sort of knew,
Mm-hmm.
probably ain't going to work out that way. And do we still do it? And we could have as easily been wrong as we were right. Nobody knows, nobody knows in that environment what the world was going to do, or how, the luxury spa market was going to behave in that world. And the fact that we've seen the incredible growth we've been tracking, oh gosh, over the course of the last year, around 18% same store year over year, finally comping to an actual year. And the same thing was true for 2021 comping to 2019, because nobody comps to 2021. It's sort of like the
Sure.
we don't talk about Bruno, we don't talk about 2020, but it's one of those where I think we all are sort of making the best decision we can. And I think that's where we learn from one another. We learn the courage from one another to make a decision, because the worst decision is no decision, right? And so it's been I think for many of us, a really good year in 2022. But we have so many questions about supply chain and about the cost to open locations, and about, even the shortage, or permitting. Oh my gosh, it's taking so long to get permitting. And I think the more we talk to one another about those things, the more, as a business community, as a franchise business community, we can continue to thrive in what really is just a bunch of unknowns.
Great. So what would you attribute your success to? I know it might be hard to pinpoint one thing, but if you could, what is it?
Oh gosh, we use Clifton Strength Finder at our company, and I've done this since the beginning of my career. Really, it's just been something that's always been there. And the number one strength on my list is learner. So when I look at my own strengths, learner comes before command. I also have that, so that's a good CEO trait, right?
Sure.
But the learner piece of that, I think, is super important. And so I've always sort of been a student of life, I guess. And even in my early career, when my husband introduced me to franchising, it was the learner in me that said, oh, I'm intrigued by this. I want to learn more. I want to understand it. And I think I've just carried that through and wanted to learn from the things that happen, whether they're the hard knocks things where you feel like something happens to you. A victim says, oh, why me? And I think a learner says, all right, what can I take from this that makes me stronger tomorrow when the next unknown happens, right? And that's opened me up to some really, really great mentors. And so I've been so fortunate through my whole career to just be surrounded by people who are way smarter than me, but have been gracious enough to take time and answer questions. And I still do that. I think people early in their careers don't realize that people that are more advanced in their careers are often very fulfilled by answering those questions and talking about the mistakes they've made, because they can see the path now, and to help others see that path is really fulfilling. And I just found a lot of people that were willing to do that for me all the way from the beginning of my career.
That's wonderful. Now, I'm jumping around with my questions here a little bit, but I know when we spoke last week, you actually mentioned one of your mentors who once gave you advice about determining your non-negotiables, meaning those things that matter to you the most in a job. So can you talk a little bit about that? And as your career has evolved, how did you determine those things that matter to you the most? And then have they changed now so many years later?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'll out her. A lot of people in franchising know Susan Beth, and she's just a natural mentor. And she's the one that actually used that terminology with me. And it really clicked, because I think those of us that have moved up in leadership, if you're in franchising is so dominated now with private equity, and private equity thinks in these 5-year sprints. And so many companies will buy and sell and change in these sort of sprints. And so it means career changes. It means leadership changes sometimes. And just understanding sort of, what is it that you're wanting for your broader life is really the question. And so you're chasing a career, you're excited by that, you're fueled by it. But if you're not really clear on what your life should be like, you can make some missteps in there that may be great jobs, but really not great personally. And you say, what has evolved? Well, I had an unexpected event happen right when I was taking my first corner office. So I had no children, and it wasn't a huge priority for me, but I found myself pregnant right before I stepped into Camp Bow Wow unexpectedly. And my husband, who's 7 years older, couldn't say anything but, oh my God, for about, a week, because we both were not expecting this. And so, and being 44 when it happened, even more unexpected.
Sure.
It changes a bit the way that you think about things. And so going into that role and really thinking about, what's next beyond it, where do I go? I really wanted to find home. I wanted it to be something that this was going to be my big thing, the way it was with Curves. But it doesn't always work out that way. And so when that company, sold to Mars, so our parent company sold to Mars, a family-owned business, I started getting recruiter calls, started thinking about what was next. And I knew at that point, the non-negotiable was I probably wasn't going to leave Denver. I wanted to stay here in Denver. But in the next stage of my career, when I left Pure Bar and went to Sola, that wasn't the case. It was really thinking about where would I want to live. And that idea of non-negotiables, it was really about where I don't want to live, right? And so I knew for me, it was, sunny places. I like the South. I like Colorado because it's sunny even when there's snow.
Sure.
And I knew that so many of these opportunities that came in the Northeast, it probably wasn't going to be a fit. And it gave me the clarity to be able to turn down some really good offers and know that that wasn't going to fit the lifestyle that I wanted to have. And then I think the other thing is I loved the mission of Curve. Strengthening women was a mission that resonated with me. And that's what appealed to me about Camp Bow Wow. Happy pets, happy people is such an amazing mission that you see it goes beyond just, a business proposition to something that was about a life issue. And that's what I found, I think, being in wellness and beauty is that the content of it is happy content. And as we've gotten into Radiance and we were putting our core values together, our motto is joy through beauty. And our number one value is joy. That we want people who are joyful, who are trying to create joy for others in the way that they build their teams internally, and then want to create joy for people in the way that they run their businesses to the consumer world. And that's the part where as you're navigating a career, think about that content. What really resonates with you? Because if you really love tacos, you're going to love tacos. But if that doesn't resonate with you, don't sell tacos, right? So I think you got to kind of know what's going to fuel you every day and get you out of bed, because every day is not easy. But if you love what you're doing, for some reason, every day fuels you.
I think that that's something that a lot of people need reminded of because they're always chasing the next opportunity, but it doesn't always necessarily bring them joy. So I love that. I'm going to write down joy over here on my wall here. So let's think back to when you were first starting your career. And if you could give yourself one piece of advice back when you were, 22 years old or so, what would that be?
Oh gosh. Wow. I get to have one piece of advice for my 22-year-olds.
Right.
I think it would probably be don't listen to that voice of imposter syndrome. And now it has a name. When I was 22, it didn't have a name. It was just self-doubt. That's really what it was. And you didn't realize that everyone feels it. And I think now that we, in the business community talk more openly about imposter syndrome and understand it as a thing, we think that it's easier to overcome because now it has a name, right? We just give it a name and we can all agree. It's not true. It's there every single day. And I think that we all need to understand, that it is your constant companion no matter at what level. The thing I've learned as I've grown through my career is that everyone actually has a boss. So you think, the moment of insecurity, you want your boss to be really proud of you. You think, well, if I get high enough in leadership, I won't have a boss anymore and I won't feel that. You always have a boss. So you sit in the CEO chair and your boss is a board. You sit in the board chair and your boss is a bank. It's like
Right.
no matter where you are, you've got somebody who's going to question the decisions you're making and that is probably smarter than you. And I think once you get comfortable with that idea and you realize that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, you have to be the one that is the most willing to lean in and bring the strengths that you have, and then to lean out and let someone else shine and bring the strengths they have, the less that imposter syndrome will hold you back. But you're always going to have it. And I think if my 22-year-old self had known that, I would have enjoyed the journey more. I think I was still willing to take the risks. I think there are a lot of people who let that voice dominate so much that they don't take the risks. They don't put themselves out there and take those risks. And so if there was anything I could tell her, it would be that, like don't let it spoil it for you. Just enjoy the journey of it. Don't let it give you the anxiety that I had so much when I was younger.
It's really great advice. Now, along those lines, I'd also love to get your advice for people in franchising who aren't just starting out. Maybe they're mid-career, maybe they feel stuck, they're kind of in a rut. I feel like a lot of interviews ask for advice for people just starting out, just getting out of college. But I feel like we're going to have some people listening to this podcast that are mid-career and they just want some advice for them. So, what would you tell them? Should they switch jobs, try something new, maybe find that spark of joy that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's such I love this question. So you talked to me about this when we were talking about this last week. It it is such an interesting thing how at every age we feel old. So when you're 29, you feel like, oh my God, I'm almost 30
Almost
and
30. Yeah.
I didn't accomplish all those things I was going to do before I'm 30. And then you're mid 30. Oh my gosh, I'm almost 40 and I didn't accomplish all this. And I think what you realize as you get older, looking back, if you're willing to take the risks at every stage, it just gets richer and richer and richer.
Mhm.
You've never actually arrived. And I think if you're thinking about this mid-career and you don't like where you are, you need to get really clear on where you want to be. And that is the hardest thing in the world to do. But to get that vision board to say, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure about this. I'm sure I don't like living where I live, or I'm sure I don't like the content of the job that I'm in, or I'm sure I want to work at a higher level position. If you get sure about one thing and you're really focused on that, the opportunities start to open, but you have to lean into the change. So I didn't go back to get my MBA until I was 38, and I went
Mhm.
into a 2-year executive program. And all those voices in my head said, Christina, you're old. You're going to be the oldest person in the program. And oh my God, I can't believe you're even thinking about doing this. You won't be done until you're 40. And what are you even thinking? I heard all those voices. And then you come up with all these reasons like, oh, you're going to have to go back and take the GRE and blah, blah, blah. So I finally just got the courage to go talk to the program and say, tell me how this works. What does this look like? Here are the fears that I have. So it's the learner thing. Lean in and learn about it. And what she said is, oh, you won't have to take the GRE. With people who are at your level of career and your experience, we waive that requirement. And it was sort of like that barrier that was so palpable and real that I was going to have to study for and take this annoying test. It was an unreal barrier. And so I would just say, don't believe your own stuff about this. Quit telling yourself that you're at an age where it's too late, because it's never too late. It's never too late. And even, becoming a mom was like, what the heck am I doing at 44 having a baby? And all I could do was laugh, because there was no planning there. It was a God thing.
Right.
It was going to happen. And it has been the most amazing thing for my husband and I. So he early retired. He's a stay-at-home dad. I'm the primary breadwinner. Not intuitive, not the way we would have done it if we had put it on
Right.
paper. But it all works out. And I think it's just being open to those things, and then surround yourself with people who've given you the courage. So I've given advice to people on that topic about MBA in 2 cases where they've gone back to get their MBAs. It was life-changing. It was life-changing for me. It's life-changing for them. And I think whether it's something like that or just making that big career move, you need to surround yourself with those people that give you the courage, because the voices in your head are usually wrong. They're not right.
I think you're going to have a lot of listeners signing up for MBA programs after they hear this, myself included. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Um, let's see. I think that was pretty much all of the questions that I had. Before we wrap up, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share? Any maybe final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Yeah, I think my final words of wisdom are really around franchising. And it's something that when I discovered franchising, it really was for me the true pathway to the American dream. And I just think so many people that find their way into this industry may not realize how profound that is. And so starting as a franchisee and doing what I've done career-wise, and seeing, through all the brands that I've been in, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of successful people who never would have found that success had it not been for franchising. I would just say, for everyone out there listening, we're all in the franchise sector. there's so much importance in the work that we're doing, and the IFA and the work that they do, I think, is just so critical to that. So lean in as much as you can. It's going to help you career wise, but it also, I think, is a business model that makes what we do, it makes the world a better place. It creates opportunities for people who wouldn't have it. I grew up poor. I didn't grow up in a college bound family. I didn't grow up in a world where people talked about, boundless opportunity. And it wasn't until I discovered franchising that I realized that was actually possible for me. And that story, I think, happens over and over and over again. So take pride in that aspect of the work. And just, if we all work together to make this industry everything it can be, I think that's a mission. It's a mission in and of itself. So I think just stand proud. And I'll see you at the IFA conference in February.
Right. In February. Exactly. That's a good plug for that. Well, Christina, thank you so much for sharing your story and your knowledge with us today. I think along with the Women's Franchise Committee and all of our listeners who will be listening to this in the next few weeks, really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.